Hello, this is Kevin again here with part two of the tutorial for chapter 5 in the third edition Zelle Python book. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take the one that we just did and we're going to turn it into, we're going to convert it to the batch pattern. Now, you remember from the lecture that the nature of the batch pattern is instead of just getting one line of input, say, from the console, we're going to actually open a text file, and for each line of input that we read, we're going to do our work in a repetitive way. So we're going to create multiple lines of output on the basis of the input that we have. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So what I want to do is I want to convert vowel analytics, in my case, to a program that's called batch vowel analytics. Okay, so cool. So what am I going to do? Well, first of all, let's create the file. So I'm going to do that. I need a new Python file, and I want to call it batch vowel analytics. Okay, and I have that. So I'm going to copy the comments from the beginning from my already baked version. Okay, and I'm going to close this thing down here so I don't have to look at that. That's from our last one. Okay, so here are the requirements. Analyze a series of text lines that are read from a text input file. For each line of text, report the line being analyzed. So I guess we want to print the line being analyzed. Then report on how many vowels each word contains. Also, report the number of words that were analyzed. That's for each line of text. After processing all input lines, report the number of lines that were analyzed. Okay, so this is going to be a little trick here. So let's see what we can do. Again, a good thing for you to begin to do is to take a pause here and think about how you would do it. Okay. Now, pretty typically, if I have a program that I'm going to kind of clone into the next one, I might not spend a lot of time on pseudocode, but I would have some pretty specific ideas about what I would be doing to the code before I would start. So how about you pause here and get some of those ideas yourself, and then when you come back, you'll see what I did. Okay, we're back. So, again, we're going to begin with a main, right? It's our standard stuff. And we're going to skip a couple lines. Sorry, and we're going to call main, right? That's our standard structure. Okay. Now, I'm going to kind of show you another couple of things that I want to do that we weren't doing before. Okay, and that's this. I have decided that we're going to read these from an input file, and it is going to be it's going to be a fixed name for the file, valdata.txt. How did I decide that? Well, I'm going to give you that file. I created that file, validata.txt. And if you give me a second, I'm going to go get it, and I'm going to copy it into our project. Be right back. Okay, so I went out and I got a copy from the directory that's holding my already baked version. And now I'm going to paste it in here. And you'll see that it's called, wants to be called validata.txt. Okay, and that we can open this up. And it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in it. Each of them has one of my typical learn how to type sentences. The last line, the last apparent line, is just the result of a new line having been used at the end of line 4. So there really isn't a line 5. It's an empty line 5. It's just the new line at the end of line 4. Okay? And I think we've talked about that in a prior tutorial. Okay, so that's the data. Okay. So what are we going to do? Now, even though we're using a general pattern of input, process, output, there are times when, before you start the main work of the program, you need to set things up. And I think I mentioned this before. When I was a lad, we called this housekeeping. And it's a little bit old-fashioned kind of data processing kind of name, but I like it. Okay. And so what do we do in housekeeping? Well, we usually open the files that we need to open. And if we need to initialize some of the variables, we do that. So this is what I've done. I've got a constant file name. I open it for input. I open that for reading. And I want to count all of the lines, and it's going to turn out that that's not going to be easy to do unless we accumulate them as we go. Okay, the last time we had to accumulate something overall, it was kind of easy because the things we needed to count were in a list, and we just had to ask for the length of that list. And the only way to get the length of the number of lines in a file is actually to count them. You could ask for the length of the file, and they just would be counted. So better to do it explicitly like we're going to be doing. Okay, and then at the end of the program, and this is pretty standard stuff, I usually have something that I kind of refer to as cleanup. What's cleanup? Well, it's kind of a housekeeping name, but sometimes people will say in baseball, they say that they bat cleanup. They're the last batter up. So it's the last thing that we do. Okay. And we just close the input file. All right. So then the work of the main is going to be in between those two. So what's that look like? Well, let's get a look at this. Okay. I'm going to begin by creating a loop that is going to iterate over the lines in the input file. You'll remember that because a text file is a sequence of text lines, we can say for line in file, and it will read the lines one at a time, and it will give them to us in a loop. And then when we go through the body, we can do the work that we need to do. So we need to do a little more work here. I added the requirement that we would print out the line itself because, we're analyzing more than one line. And it's going to be hard to evaluate that vowel count output if we don't know what line it's for. We don't know what text was there. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to print analyzing and colon space, and then we're going to have the text of the line. Well, why do I have this odd slice expression at the end? Well, we'll leave it out. Let's leave it out now, okay? And what we're going to find out, we're going to get double spacing, okay? But we'll come back, okay? We want to bump up the line count, which we set to 0 there. We're accumulating the lines as we go along. We just want to do the logic that we did before. We're doing it in a repetitive kind of a batch-oriented way. So, of course, we're going to want to shift it to lowercase. Okay. And then let's see. I'm just going to take what I called processing before, right? And I'm going to throw it in here. It's inside of another loop, but I think that's a good place for it. Okay, so we split the line. Okay. And then we're going to do the rest of the work that we did in this single line version. Okay? So that's pretty good. Okay, so we shifted to lower, and then we say for word in words. Okay, we set the vowel count to 0, and then we bump it up for every A, E, I, O, U we find. Okay, and then when we're done, we print word has vowel count vowels. Okay, and then when we're done, we say we print so many words were analyzed for this line. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay. Let's give that a test, just the way it is right now. Okay. So let's run batch vowel analytics. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. Let's look. So we have, we're analyzing how now brown cow, and then we do the quick brown fox, then we do now's the time for all good women, and then we do wet birds never fly at night. So, okay, we are iterating over the lines in the input file. That looks pretty to me. Okay. What's not pretty to me is that I was expecting there to be a skip line before I put out the line that we were analyzing, because I wanted to separate each of the groups by a line. So I'm not surprised there, but I was initially surprised when I did my version that I got a blank line after, until I remembered, oh, every line that we read in has a new line at the end. Okay, and when we say to print it, we'll get double spacing unless we say, oh, disregard the last character. So how can we disregard the last character? Well, instead of saying that we want to print line there, we want to come back and say that we want to print line, but trim off the last character. Okay? Now, what's a \n? This gives us a blank line before the grouping. And if you want to separate these things from each other, you have to put an extra blank line either before the start of the grouping, like I did here, or at the end of the grouping. The problem is that you never really know where the end of the grouping is. So the before turns out to be the practical decision right there. Okay? All right, so why don't we run that? So I'm going to give this a run and see how this looks. Does this look like I'd like it to? Yeah, it does look like I'd like it to. Yeah, and it's the same logic. I copied it out of the other program, so you won't be surprised. So how now a brown cow works the same way. We're skipping lines in between each of our lines, so that's good. All right. Now, have I covered all my requirements? No, I haven't. The last thing I said was, after processing all input lines, report the number of lines that were analyzed. Okay. So, that's not that hard to do. Okay. So, before I go and do cleanup, I want to do that. Okay. So, let's look at this. On what level does this go? Well, if we put it right where we print words were analyzed, it's going to print one time per line of the file. That's too often. So what we want to do is we want to come out here and we want to print, we want this to be right up on the same level as all of our top level code. Okay? And what did I do? Well, I skipped a blank line with a print. Okay, and then I said line count. Lines were analyzed from the file, and then I give the name of the input file. So let's see this. I had originally tried to skip a line with a new line, but it turned out kind of ugly. So I decided to go back and just have a plain print here without any arguments to get my blank line. Okay? So let's give this a run now. And what do we get? 4 lines were analyzed from the file data.txt. Pretty cool. Okay, so now it's time for you to work on your companion program that's part of your assignment. And how's it going to be different? Well, you're going to convert the program that you created in exercise 1, which counts something slightly different than vowels, and you're going to turn it into a batch version of itself. Okay? So pretty good. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.